midwifery services to clients from various countries, offers training and certification to aspiring midwives and caregivers, conduct workshops to generate awareness on the benefit of natural birth and midwifery, support women empowerment, and work tirelessly in all related fields to achieve our ultimate goal, the betterment and progress of mankind. We have very wonderful, fantastic classes for this year. Please join us, stay with us, and hope to see you in next classes. Here we are.
Hi, Anna.
Here waiting for I'm waiting for Dr. Edson. Hi. Hi, Anna. Welcome. Oh, Dr. Edson, join us. Welcome, Dr. Edson. Today we are with Dr. Edson, and we are going to talk about advanced in midwifery. So first of all, welcome, Dr. Edson. Thank you for joining us and spending time, and you want to share your valuable knowledge to midwives and other healthcare professionals. Please, over to you, Dr. Edson. If you can first introduce yourself, and we are all over hearing to you. Thank you. Please. Dear all, please write in chat box from where you are joining us and from which professional you are. Thank you so much. Welcome, Anna, Jinus, Irene, Niveta, Rachel. Thank you. Please turn on your camera. And if you have any question, please write your question in the chat box. Then at the end of the session, we will have 5 minutes Q&A. You can ask your question and share your knowledge and experience with us. Thank you so much. Dr. Edson, over to you, please.
Hello, good morning from Brazil. Hi, I'm very pleased to be here with you. I may confess I was a little confused about time zone. I thought I should enter 3 hours yet, but excuse me. And I'm very glad to be here. I am a doctor from Brazil. I work in a very large hospital here in Brazil for more than 15 years. I have been working as an advisor for the Health Ministry of Brazil because Brazil government, 10 years ago, it launched a project, a policy with the objective aiming to change the obstetric model of care here in Brazil. We have been working hard, but we have faced many challenges, many obstacles, but I think we have made some changes. There are yet many changes to do, but we have progressed a little. Then I'm available, and my lecture is ready. I don't know if we will go through directly to the presentation, or if we will have some conversation before.
Well, I'd like to talk to you. You're in Brazil. What city are you in Brazil?
I am from Belo Horizonte. Is between Brasilia, the capital, the Brazilian capital, São Paulo, and Rio de Janeiro. There is a triangle. We are in the middle of this triangle. It's
I see.
Yes, we have around 2 million people here in Belo Horizonte.
Wow. Yeah, I'm in Belize. I'm in Belize, and we only have 300,000 people in the whole country. And it's hard to make changes here too.
Yes, it's hard to make changes. In Brazil, these policies aimed to make changes first in the largest hospitals. because we had a very traditional model of care here in Brazil, medical centered, and many interventions. It's hard to change that. In 3 or 4 years ago, there was another project that aimed to introduce changes in the university hospitals, the hospitals that form and that train people. But now I think things are a little paralyzed for this.
That's a good word. Paralyzed.
Yes.
You're a good man. You're a good man. That's funny.
The last
Who's
2
paralyzed?
years.
Is the thinking paralyzed?
No, I think there was a government change, and there was a change in policy, and at least at the government level, things are a little paralyzed. That
Why?
does mean the society, well, there is a very conservative government, and I think they
What do they
don't
have?
want change.
What does the government have to do with doctors changing their thinking? Nothing. Nothing. You can make a doctor change his thinking and he can change his practice. We don't have to have the government make a rule that we have to do it. You want me to make it a law that if you cut a episiotomy, you go to jail? No. You have to change the doctor's thinking. That's got nothing to do with the government. Nothing to do with the government. Come on.
Yes, but there are very strong movements from society, from the woman, and from midwives. Midwives are already moving, are always moving. Yes, doctors don't move, but midwives move.
What are we going to do with you men and the women? What would shake you?
Yes, women.
I come visit you in Brazil. We'll have fun.
Yes, midwives move, women move. There are some doctors that move too. There are some teachers that move. Yes, there are people that want to move, and there are people that don't want to move. We have
I
to.
understand that. I get you. I get you. Most don't want to move.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're on our side. We need every single good thinking doctor. They are precious to us.
Yes, I work in my hospital. I think it's a leader, has a very important leadership role in Brazil, because we are a very large hospital. We have around 10,000 childbirths each year. And yes, it's a very large hospital. And since it was founded 30 years ago, it had already this kind of care we are talking about since its founding 30 years ago. Midwife and woman-centered care, and no interventions, only when necessary. And for 10 years, we have been training medical, we have a medical residency here. And now we form 8 new obstetricians each year, 8. And 8 by 8, we have, our group is increasing, 8 by 8.
Good.
Each year.
All right. All right. I know.
And I have to say that I was formed when I was trained 20 years ago. My training was very traditional. I've learned everything that I had to unlearn after. I learned I learned to make episiotomy, and I learned to make fundal pressure. My training 20 years ago was very traditional, and and when I moved to this hospital where I work today, then I learned I changed many things about my training, my original training.
Wow.
And I learned with the midwives that worked there. There were many experienced midwives there. And
fantastic.
this was a huge revolution in my mind. I
Wow.
had to change many concepts.
Well, that's wonderful. I appreciate you very much.
Yes. And it happened soon after my first and my only daughter was born. And when I see the pictures from that delivery, I don't feel myself glad, because I can see many mistakes with my own daughter.
Aww.
And this is what happens, because when we finish our training, we believe we know, we are experienced, we are experts, we have the skills to care. But I've learned with my own daughter that I had made the better. And until today, it's not easy to talk about that with my wife and my daughter. Until today, we have some scars.
Yes.
Because when we see the pictures, they are not. If it was today, we should make everything different.
Right. Well, it's hard. I admire you very much for sharing that, because we've all learned from our past mistakes, even if it's not a medical thing. We all have to admit that what we did was an error, or we made a bad choice, or we just didn't know, or every teenager thinks they know everything. And so we all, when you can share that and how you feel about it, that helps me understand that you know and care for women. So I thank you very much for sharing that experience, that your personal experience. That's impressive to me that you will do that.
Yes, it's something yes, I usually talk about that, because if we want to change something, we have to sometimes we have to know the steps we have done to change ourselves first, because when I finished my training, I was very convinced that it was the best way. It was the right way to care for. I was very convinced. I was very young, and sometimes we are very proud. We are, and this makes change a little more difficult when we talk to proud people and to people that are very strongly convinced about the rightness of what they are doing. And
yeah,
and yes, sometimes we need something very personal to change the mind.
right. Well, there's I teach a little bit on philosophy, and it says there's only two ways to change things. One is constant spaced repetition. In other words, we hear the same thing over and over. And the other one is trauma or emotional impact. And what you're sharing with me is emotional impact can cause the quickest change. But the other way is what you're doing now, and what I'm doing, and what Lily's trying to do is constant spaced repetition of this is the new way to do it. This is the new way to do it. This is the new way to do it. And that takes time, as you're finding out, and as I've been fighting this for 50 years. So it's constant spaced repetition, exposure, exposure, exposure. Lily's very good at this. You're now participating. But when people can experience it through an impact of trauma, you're hooked, and you then become part of the cause and part of the cure, right?
Right. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So you're on the right path for learning lots of thousands of things. You're way younger than me. And I am so jealous of all you young, wonderful people, because I didn't become a midwife till I was 40 years old. And I came to it from trauma too, from seeing things at hospitals that hurt people, not just in the midwifery community, but in other aspects of healthcare. So then I decided I had to participate. So I've only been fighting for 50, 40 years. You got 60 years to keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're wonderful. I'm so happy.
Yes, I'm very happy to be a member of this group. I'm now seeing Irene here. Hi.
Hi, Irene. How are you? Unmute yourself. Can't hear you.
That's it. Hello. Good morning.
Hi,
Hello,
Irene.
Irene.
I just woke up.
What?
It's 3 a.m. I kind of, my husband said there's somebody talking in the kitchen.
It's a ghost. It's a ghost.
It's a ghost.
Welcome, Irene. Nice to see you again.
It's good. Yes, it's good to be back on here. It's been a bit hectic here in New Zealand. We're going through some crazy times, but things are happening. I started my new role, and we have a new health council with chiropractors, naturopaths, and doctors, and I've just headed the new midwifery council, which is out of the corporate sector. And I met with the Mary midwives, Robin, it's he, and they do lots of spiritual healing. He was teaching me the rods, how to use the rods and the energies to see if there's something wrong with the baby or the mother. It was very fascinating to see how that picks things up on an energy level. So we're going back to more natural, we'll be using very little pharmaceutical medicines in the future. So we've got a whole new curriculum and a whole new learning for everybody here. So that's kind of basically what I'm doing here. So there'll be a lot more home births.
Welcome.
A lot more in the HAPUs, in the communities, as opposed to in the hospitals.
Good, good, good.
Well, I think we're breaking away from the corporate system, so we're going to have there'll be a lot of midwifery councils. We've got lots of areas starting to get ready. They've got their own little law courts setting up, and they'll have their own community education centers, so that it's going to be all broken down into smaller areas, which is
Good.
quite exciting. So the regulation will be reduced, you know, the over-regulation. And the centres will be run by the women in the midwives, and they will be making their own policies and deciding what they need.
All right. Wonderful leader you are. You are a wonderful leader.
Well, the corporate sector don't like me.
Hey, come on,
just-
that's the best way.
Well, they don't quite understand that I've actually had to take my name off the register with them, which was really hard, and they still haven't taken it off. And I told them to take it off, and they've suspended me. So how can you suspend me when I'm already legally working as a midwife and I'm head of another midwifery council? You just don't like it.
Oh, come on. I know.
They just gotta get used to it.
If they can't control you, they're just going to suspend you. It's an honor. It's an honor.
Well, I did it on purpose. I put myself in to do it on purpose to rescue the other midwives, really. I didn't have to do it, but
Okay.
I did it. Yeah,
Good for
yeah,
you.
to deregister, because what they do is they unlawfully put you into a trust as a trustee, and then you can't get out of it.
Ooh.
So they will only put you to sleep. Put you to sleep. So we're taking them on with a common law that they've forgotten about, that they've overridden.
Oh.
Yeah, so I wrote to them and told them to take me off it before they suspended me, because I told them I didn't have trust in the system. I didn't, you know me.
Well, that's wonderful. I think that's amazing.
Well, I think so. I think, well, I've got the angels on my side because they gave me the power to do it and put me in the right places to do it.
Very good. Excellent.
Well, because of the no job, they've lost about 400 midwives here.
Whoa. Wow. That's
Yeah,
a lot.
no choices. Yeah. But we're in the 11th hour of that, so I'm not worried about that. We sensible ones are getting ready for the light at the end of the tunnel.
All right. I agree. I totally agree.
Hi, Dr. Edson. Good evening. We can start the presentation now.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello. May I begin my presentation?
Yes.
But you have to I need to share my screen. It's not able.
Yeah, sure. Would you please make Dr. Edson co-host? Yeah, would you please make Dr. Edson co-host?
I've already done that. You can do it also.
Okay, it's okay. It's in the mode full screen.
Yeah, you can do that. It is on the full screen. You can start it.
Okay, is it okay?
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, first of all, I have to thank you. I have to thank Irene for introducing me to this team. I've knew Irene in China, and we've made very good journeys there in China. I'm very glad to have shared those beautiful days there in China. And I'm very glad to be here. I mean, I'm very thankful to you all. I will talk about some things that seems to be very simple. I have indeed two presentations. I have to explain that there I changed a little the program. The program talking about the first stage of labor, and but because I've begun to prepare my lecture from the second stage, and it grew and grew up, and I think I have many things to talk about the second stage of labor. But I will talk first about history. I like to tell histories, and I will talk about something about the history of care in first stage of labor. And this is my hospital, Sophia Feldman Hospital, where I work. And in the picture on the right is my city, Belo Horizonte.
I can't see it. Nope.
You cannot see?
Nope.
Then
now I can see it. Now I can see it. Perfect. It was there. You had it.
Yes, you are audible, doctor, and it is visible. You can go on, please. Thank you so much. Everybody, please turn on your camera and write in chat box from where you are joining us. We will be so thankful to participate at the end of the class and share your question at the end of session. If you participate in today's class, we will provide you certificate of attendance. Thank you. Doctor?
I saw it, Dr. Edson. I saw it. Yeah, I can see it now.
Yes, it's okay.
Yes.
Okay, then I will talk about two very simple statements. The first one, we should do less vaginal examinations for assessing progress of labor. And the second one, we should use less synthetic oxytocin for augmentation of labor too. It's okay?
Yes.
You can see? Yes, okay. Well, first about the vaginal examination. You know that vaginal examinations are a common procedure at admission and during labor. And we have to think everything we know when we are caring for a woman. We have to know which are our goals. And relating to a vaginal examination in the admission of a patient for labor, usually people usually want to evaluate the pelvis. But what are really the goals? What we want to evaluate in the pelvis? Should we think the pelvis is not good or pelvis is not adequate for labor? We know that labor is a result of millions and millions of years of evolution. And it's a very strange thing to think that we could imagine pelvis is not good for labor. And what should be the accuracy of vaginal examination to evaluate pelvis? Well, we have to go back to the end of 19th century. We know that industrial revolution, during industrial revolution in Europe, many people moved from country to the cities in England and France and Germany and all big European cities. And during this movement, two things happened. The first one, there was a lot of malnutrition because there was a lot of poverty. And as long as malnutrition, there was together low sun exposure, and this caused many epidemic of rickets. And rickets, and when women have rickets, we know pelvis changes and it becomes more straight. And this occurred. Meanwhile, there was what some people name progress in obstetrics, and that means intervention in obstetrics. And craniotomy, you can see this terrible thing here. It was a very used instrument, a very used tool for, in a way, to make childbirth there in women with rickets that had many problems with the pelvis. And then we have to understand that C-section was developed during this period, and the main objective then was to save women with rickets from childbirth. And indeed, there was very many problems with this kind of disease there. And when C-section was developed, rickets was the main, or maybe the single indication for a C-section at the beginning of the 20th century. And date from that time, the affirmative that once a C-section, always a C-section. Indeed, because C-section was done only in women with rickets, if they had rickets, they should always have rickets. Then C-section, this was one of the authors in that time, he believed that the extension of C-section to conditions other than dystocia from contracted pelvis or tumors should be exceptional and infrequent. Then C-section was an intervention that aimed to treat women with rickets. But as the C-section became more and more safe and the technique improved indeed, and mortality too became lower, it decreased from almost 100% mortality to 0.01% mortality in 2017. Then we have to admit that there were improvements in technique, there were improvements in antibiotics, blood products, and C-section became indeed a very safe procedure. So safe that some people believe it is a perfect, it reached perfection. And in Brazil, at least, some people believe that this is an aphorism here. We must declare that we must never repent of having had a C-section. But time and time, however, we regret that we did not resort to an abdominal delivery, a C-section. Then this what happened. C-section became for many people an example of perfection, something that is perfect, and because so perfect that it should be a possible option as safe as vaginal birth and as perfect as vaginal birth. And this entered in the mind of many people, and many people believe in that. But still in the beginning of 20th century, in this time, predicting the chance of vaginal delivery was indeed a very important thing. And pelvimetry was used to do that. And this became a sign of the obstetrician expertise. If careful pelvimetry is performed during pregnancy, the surprises will be few, and the possibility of dystocia can usually be anticipated and the necessary measures taken. Then it was a very important thing to check, to verify the pelvis. And indeed, there should be problems there. But the times changed, and the situation there existed in beginning of 20th century, it doesn't exist anymore. There, and many times all over the world, nutrition became better, and we don't have anymore those kind of problems we had in that time. And during this time, and now I will present some evidences, during this time, this kind of intervention, pelvimetry, this became something obsolete. And the literature shows that clearly. No studies proved that to assess or to evaluate pelvis before labor, if this should make things better, then this is not indicated. There is no indication to make routine clinical pelvimetry on admissions in labor to evaluate pelvis. But I think some things are very strong in the mind of people. I remember when I was a resident 20 years ago, I had a teacher, and he was used to make vaginal examination before labor, and sometimes he talked very convincingly. This woman is not able to deliver just using a simple vaginal examination. And as an apprentice, I thought, wow, I want to be like this man. I want to be as expert as this man. I want to know how to make a vaginal examination. And from this vaginal examination, I will be able to predict if the woman will be able to deliver. And this is not true. There are no means to predict if the woman will be able to deliver. We have to permit this woman to labor. Well, objective 2, to assess labor progress. But why assess childbirth progress? And if we have to assess it, is vaginal examination an accurate method to assess childbirth progress? Are there any adverse effects, and are there alternative methods? And these are the asks I would like to present to you. Until mid-20th century, there was no routine vaginal examination to assess progression of labor. If we look at ancient books like 1923 and in the middle of the century, they said that it should be probably necessary to make more than one vaginal examination in abnormally long labor, defined as 24 hours or more, as infrequent as possible, and at most once or twice during labor. After 24 hours of labor, a vaginal examination should always be done. Then look, these were the books that were published in the beginning or in the mid of last century. Then a routine vaginal examination was not used during labor. Before the Industrial Revolution, there was no concern with the progress of childbirth. Indeed, people believed that women were prepared to labor and to deliver. Look at a book in the 1807. After an examination, vaginal examination, if the presentation of the child be natural, pelvis well formed, soft parts in a relaxed state, and the patient free from disease, we may safely assure her friends that all the appearances are promising, and the labor will be finished in all probability with perfect safety both to the mother and child. I think this is very interesting. They were not worried about progression of labor. This was a natural thing. Labor should progress. This was a natural thing. And more contemporary authors things have changed, and we will see many things were introduced in the routine, but still today we know too little from first stage of labor. Jung, a very important author, said that our inability to reduce the C-section rate, and it's not just about to reduce the C-section rate, but to care for labor, not just to reduce the C-section rate, but our inability to care for labor, we could change the word. Our inability to care for labor may be attributable in part to the incomplete understanding of a normal labor process, particularly in the first stage of labor. But there is a problem. Owing to the various interventions in contemporary obstetric practice, a natural process of labor progression no longer can be studied in a large population. And this is academic problem, because academy believes in the literature, but the literature is not able anymore to describe the natural history of labor. We have to search for it in ancient books or in other contemporary practices, like the home births, people that care for home births. These people knows the natural history of labor progression, or women that give birth in birth centers outside hospitals. They too can describe, can explain, can describe the natural process of labor progression. But studies that are made inside hospitals, they should never be able to describe natural labor progression. Well, when was routine vaginal examination incorporated into obstetric practice? We can track it to the middle of the century, when Friedman described what was known as the labor curve. A curve of normality in labor. And then when he has done this study, he made an vaginal examination hourly. And what was the study protocol? This was introduced in normal practice. And since then, many hospitals all over the world became began to use routine vaginal examination as a routine, and many times 2 hourly, 3 hourly, and in some places hourly. And this is something that is really terrible. And soon after, there was the partograph was introduced in Africa, and it spread all over the world. It's a good idea for people that that live very far from hospitals, but it introduced the action line. This action line, I think it's against the principles of obstetrics. The action line means you have to act from one point in obstetrics, sometimes observation, at least we understand observation as a kind of action. But it has to be clear that observation is also a kind of action. Well, what are the evidences about routine vaginal examination? They are too few, only 2 trials of unclear quality. And on the basis of these trials of unclear quality, there is no evidence about routine vaginal examination during labor. It is surprising that there is such a widespread use of this intervention without good evidence of effectiveness, particularly considering the sensitivity of the procedure for the woman receiving it and the potential for adverse consequences in some settings. Then it is a thing that is widespread used all over the world and so few evidence. Well, I will come back to this point, to this topic again in the end of this history. But before I talk about it again, I will talk about synthetic oxytocin. Which are the goals too? Well, oxytocin for labor augmentation is one of the
Sorry,
most...
Dr. Edson. I'm very sorry to interrupting you. Even asking if it is possible you make on your presentation, because I guess the other slide is not visible.
What?
Sorry to disturbing you. Sorry.
Excuse me, doctor. It is, you'll have to play with the
Your slide.
presentation because we are stuck on the first slide, I guess.
Stuck in the first slide?
Yeah, we don't see the other slides. Yeah.
It's not possible.
Slides,
to
that's
this-
it. Yeah. Good one.
Well, oxytocin for labor, you know, is one of the most widely used drugs in the world. Up 1/3 of the women have a delay in progress, according to the current definitions. This is a WHO statement. In a maternity ward in Sweden, more than half of the women used oxytocin. In Brazil, 38% of low-risk women use oxytocin in labor. This was a large study made in Brazil. And this is not possible if we used oxytocin to treat abnormality in labor. If we use it in around 1/3 or half of the women, this means we have to admit that these people have abnormal labor. It's not possible that so many women should have an abnormal labor. And oxytocin is a dangerous drug. It's not an inoffensive drug. Oxytocin is the drug most commonly associated with preventable adverse perinatal outcomes and was recently added by the Institute for Safe Medication Practices to a small list of medications bearing a heightened risk of harm, which may require special safeguards to reduce the risk of error. And this is oxytocin, a drug that is used sometimes without safeguards inside our hospitals. But it's a very strange thing. How was childbirth before synthetic oxytocin? Were babies born true? And I will remember again my training times. One time I had not prescribed oxytocin for a woman that had a spontaneous labor. Then came the teacher and said to me, very angry, "Oh, if you don't prescribe oxytocin, this woman will not labor, will not deliver." as if oxytocin was essential for labor and delivery in the woman. And let's go back again to some histories. Martha Ballard, an American midwife, attended almost 1,000 childbirths during her life in rural and remote regions in the state of Massachusetts in the US. During this time, she had 5 maternal deaths and 14 fetal deaths. And more than 95% of the cases have a normal outcome without any intervention, besides herbs, ointments, and attentive waiting. This book is very interesting because it tells something about natural history of childbirth. Of course, we are not glad with that 5 maternal deaths. If she had some resources, probably she would not have these 5 maternal deaths or these 14 fetal deaths. But at least there is a lesson from this history. Many or most of the cases don't need intervention. Perhaps the 5 women that died, that woman should need some intervention, but the other don't need. And when the contraction seems to be gone, what we call inertia, contraction, dystocia, and so on. Well, contractions may be naturally intermittent. This is something that was told by the natural history of childbirth. And we can see this every day in our maternity ward. The women have very strong contractions, and sometimes contractions go. And if we had time and if we waited, they should come back again. As for the intermittent nature of contractions, it is a property as in relation to the other visceral muscles whose existence we must accept. When there are very marked obstacles to fetal expulsion, contractions, after having redoubled their strength to overcome the obstacles, are suspended for a longer or a shorter time, sometimes definitive. Yes, this is a very interesting thing because this was observed when oxytocin doesn't existed, because oxytocin is a very new medication. As the mother and child may be regarded as safe until the uterine cervix be dilated, there is seldom much necessity for medical assistance. The mind of the patient should be tranquilized by very favorable representations of her case. And in the 40s, when extracts of pituitrin began to be used in the clinic, the frequency of uterine inertia was only 3.6%. And then you can see 3.6% of problems we could tell abnormal labor. Oxytocin was synthesized in 1955. It was synthesized by the first time. Before this time, people were already using extracts from pituitary gland, pituitrin. It was already used, but oxytocin was introduced into practice in 1955. Then here we have many important milestones in the contemporary diagnosis and management of dystocia at childbirth. Then we have the Friedman curve, then the oxytocin synthesis, the active management of labor protocol, the partograph, and nowadays the young contemporary patterns of spontaneous labor. Active management of labor was introduced in 1965. And 1,000 women, all except one, delivered in 24 hours. 204 women were treated to speed labor. Well, I will tell you what were the criteria to speed up labor. And the rate of C-section was only 4%, and there was only one fetal death, which had no relation to the adopted management. Then the active management of labor became very popular around the world. And it was active management of labor is mainly amniotomy, rupture, artificial rupture of membranes, and oxytocin. In the original study of O'Driscoll in Ireland, 1/4 of the women were submitted to active management of labor. But we have to consider three very important things. First, only 8.5% of women received oxytocin, and 20% underwent amniotomy plus oxytocin. Second, C-section rate at that time was only 4%, but this was the C-section rate at the time. It was not the active management of labor that produced this kind of C-section rate. And third, and I think the most important one, each woman was cared by a midwife throughout labor. And then when the active management of labor spread to the world, I think only amniotomy and oxytocin were spread, because at least in Brazil, amniotomy and oxytocin arrived here, but the midwife care throughout labor, it did not arrive here. And then people began to apply the active management of labor, but only amniotomy and oxytocin. Well, what are the evidence regarding synthetic oxytocin and amniotomy for slow progress in the first stage of spontaneous labor? We have two very important reviews. The first one both were published in 2013. The first one assessed early amniotomy and early oxytocin for prevention or therapy for delay in first stage of spontaneous labor compared with routine care. The second, oxytocin versus no treatment or delayed treatment for slow progress in the first stage of spontaneous labor. Let's see what they say. First one, in prevention trials, early augmentation and amniotomy, what were the conclusions? There was a modest reduction in the risk of C-section. It shortened the duration of labor in around 1 hour. But if the 4 trials with a full package of active management were excluded, the risk of C-section was not affected. No other significant effects for the other indicators of maternal or neonatal morbidity. Or, in conclusion, maybe the only result was a shortened duration of labor. But why we want to shorten labor in 1.28 hours? Why we should want to do that? In treatment trials, only 3 studies, 280 women, and there was no difference in C-section rates. Then I think it's very important to talk about that, because we have been using oxytocin and artificial rupture of membranes to treat abnormal labor. And if we treat abnormal labor, our aim is to deliver, and it is to avoid the C-section. But what the literature says is that oxytocin and artificial rupture of membranes did no difference. The second Cochrane review compares oxytocin versus no treatment or to delay treatment for slow progress in the first stage of spontaneous labor. Well, what are the outcomes? No significant differences in the rates of C-section or instrumental vaginal delivery in either. Early oxytocin resulted in a significant reduction in the mean duration of labor of approximately 2 hours, but did not increase the normal delivery rate. And once again, why do we want to reduce duration of labor in 2 hours? If a woman is at ease, if the woman is feeling good with labor. Then oxytocin versus no treatment for slow progress in the first stage of spontaneous labor. No difference. This is the conclusion. And I think the conclusion is it's indeed a little, I think there is a kind of irony from the authors. If the primary goal of this treatment is to reduce C-section rates, then doctors and midwives may have to look for alternative options. I think this is very interesting. What are the alternative options? If oxytocin doesn't have the effect we should expect from it. Well, now we will talk about something about the midwifery, about care in labor. Alternative option number 1, avoid erroneous diagnosis of abnormal labor. And this means, and now we come back to vaginal examination. This means a rational use of vaginal examination. We have to know that progress of labor can be detected from facial and ocular expressions, characteristics of contractions, perception and responses to pain, respiratory patterns, vaginal secretions, voice tones, forms of interaction with the environment, walking ability, fatigue, pressure in the perineum, sweating, and so on. There are many ways to assess progress of labor. In vaginal examination, the cervical dilation, this can lead us to erroneous diagnosis of abnormal labor. It can make the woman anxious about their progression of labor. What some guidelines say about vaginal examination in labor, and there are many guidelines that have already changed or have already abolished this kind of hourly vaginal examination during labor. WHO, for example, says that number of vaginal examinations should be limited to what is strictly necessary when labor is progressing well. Well, there is no routine vaginal examination. Vaginal examination, if it will add important information to decision-making process. In Brazil, every 4 hours. In Brazil, there was a routine every 4 hours. Or if there is any concern about the progress of labor or in response to the woman's desires. Vaginal examination is part of the whole and should not be performed on a prescribed basis, for example, at every 4 hours. But when all other observations do not complete the whole picture, for you as the attending midwife, and you need to know is it will may alter or guide your plan. Then this is a suggestions we've made in our hospital, because 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a routine 3-hourly protocol. And when we tried to change this to a 4-hourly protocol, people were not agreeing with that. They were thinking they should done things wrong, then we had to show them that a 3-hourly routine was not needed. And every time, even we made it only if necessary, we have to ask woman if she allows us to do that. Alternative option 2, to use new criteria of normality. Consortium of safe labor produced a different curves of normality. The Friedman curve that was used for many times for almost half a century all over the world is not appropriated anymore. The ACOG recommendations of the first period already recognize that a prolonged latent phase should not be an indication for C-section. That means a prolonged latent phase is not means that is something abnormal with labor. And slow but progressive labor in the first stage of labor also should not be an indication for a C-section delivery. And 3, improve our care and support skills. Non-pharmacological practices had a much more expressive effect on the rate of C-sections. And when we talk about supportive care in labor, we always talk about continual support for women during childbirth and walking and upright positions in the first stage of labor. And there are strong evidence that this really can change C-section rates. And then we finally arrive to the real meaning of obstetrics, that is being next to the woman. And the fundamental rule of the obstetrician is that the treatment should not be positive, but in a great measure negative. And that means observation. Negative practice in all branches of the profession is of immense value. And in no department is this trust more important than in midwifery. And this was a very old textbook in the middle of 18th century. I love these 2 pictures because these 2 pictures show both of them are my friends, and both of them are midwives. And we can see one midwife hair brushing or brushing the hair of the laboring woman. And this, I think this means something, this is a symbol of care. And I think these 2 images symbolize what obstetrics or midwifery is: care, less vaginal examination, less synthetic oxytocin, and more support and more waiting. We have to learn waiting skills, and to learn and to teach these, I think, are the great challenges of modern obstetrics. Well, this is the history I had to tell you. If you have, you want to ask me something, I may apologize for the slides. I think we lose
Thank you so much, Dr.
very important images in the first part of the lecture.
It was very fantastic and it was very informative session, Doctor. Thank you so much. If anybody has any question, can you please write in your chat box, or if you don't mind, you can turn on your camera and ask your question, please. It was very interesting that we understood even our basic and our ancient midwifery was suggested without any intervention. And it is so fantastic to hear from you, doctor, as a gynecologist and a specialist. Thank you so much. Please, if you have any question, write in the chat box. Dear all, please turn on your camera. We want to see your beautiful face, please, if you don't mind. If you attend today's class, we will provide you a certificate of attendance for this 2 days course. Please write from where you are joining us and which profession are you belongs to. Are you from midwifery industry? You are from OB-GYN or any other healthcare industry? Thank you so much. Sajita, Mehna, Sara, Razia, Zahra, Jinus, Nivedita, Jen, Dr. Pratipa, and Faride, Fahime, Khawla, Mahbube, and Parveen. If you have any question, please. Anna, Irene, yeah. Yeah, thank you. If you have any question, please. Irene written, when we worked in China, the obstetrician and midwives were in the same classroom or understanding normal birth. Exactly, yes. Fahime, I work in infertility field as midwife. Thank you, Fahime. Thank you, Dr. Edson. I'm very pleased to talk with you. Thanks a lot. Fahime from Turkey, Nivedita, midwifery, Jinus. Thank you, doctor, for your presentation. Mahbube from Dubai, UAE, and I'm midwife. Rina, Jinus, Mahbube. So we need to find a way how to stop obstetrics. Irene, we need more obstetrician like you in our ward. And Mahbube written, thank you for preparation. But I think all the midwives in all over the world, they know these points. But unfortunately, in healthcare organizations, obstetricians are the one paying huge role for stopping this process and not allowing midwives to do their job, especially in private sector. Irene, it's so wonderful to have an obstetrician start a presentation talking about the less invasive practices and respecting the women. And any more question? Dr. Pratipa, hi, I'm from India, Chandigarh. I am women's health physiotherapist, childbirth educator, lactation, postpartum counselor. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. And Sachita, I'm Sachita from India. I am a finance and HR professional and an inspiring midwife. Wow, bravo. And Mahbube written, how we can change the power from obstetrician to midwifery. And Fahime, it was so interesting presentation. I hope one day we could apply such suggestions. Irene, I can't unmute. Would you please unmute to give access?
I've done it. I've done it. It's okay now.
Okay.
I did it. Yeah.
Please.
I think that when Edson and I know, we went into the hospitals in China and we saw the obstetricians and midwives were very stressed. The obstetricians didn't understand normal birth. And the midwives and nurses were very task orientated. They'd lost the observational skills. So when we brought everyone together, we reduced the C-section rates because they both understood each other's roles and they worked together beautifully and they were hugging each other. So Edson played a huge role in the several times he came over there. And I'm saying that there is hope. I think that we have to remove our negative energies and focus on the positive aspects. Because when we drive positive energies through our hospitals, we can actually make the change. And it's up to, midwives to start communicating with doctors. We need to stop the divide of having different coffee rooms or different social areas, or our obstetricians, even here in New Zealand, will go and sit in their own little room. So we need to have it where everybody's sitting and talking together. We need to change our systems a little bit to bridge the gap, because we need obstetricians, because we do occasionally need C-sections. We do need those emergency services. What does Edson say?
Yes, I agree with you, Irene, and I think the big challenge of to change this model is to break the high hierarchy that sometimes still exists between doctors and midwives inside hospitals. And this is a rule that it's not us that are telling this kind of rule. The people that study security inside hospitals, they also usually say that we have to break this kind of relationship that is hierarchical. We cannot have this kind of relationship. We are in the same level. One has to hear the other. And relating to childbirth care, doctors have to admit that midwives knows more. There is no dispute. We are not disputing who knows more, who is the best. That's not the issue. But the expertise of midwifery it's about caring for labor. The expertise of doctors are treating abnormalities. We have to agree what abnormality is. This is the great challenge, what abnormality is. But to know what abnormality is in labor, we have to know what normality is. And midwives knows what normality. I've read somewhere, I don't know where, that midwives are experts in normality. And I found this very interesting. Normality is the expertise of midwife is about normality. Expertise of doctors are about abnormality. But the woman is one. Now we have to. Midwives and doctors are working together, and we have to agree about that, because abnormality in obstetrics is not a kind of yes or no. There is not a frontier. It is dynamic. Yes, I think this is the challenge.
And I think as well, to remove the prescriptive care and the really strict guidelines, we need to be flexible and work with the woman and the situations. Because when I've gone into hospitals and I've seen, the obstetric run hospitals, the obstetricians are always looking in fear for abnormality. And the negativity runs through, and the nurses become afraid too. So it's kind of breaking those gaps, and it is doable. It's doable if you have the positivity, if you start breaking, start by removing the barriers between obstetrician and midwife. Like I say, have one tea room where everybody sits. Get them, get their clinics, have a midwife's room next to the obstetrician, so they're working in partnership, they're working beautifully together. Then you'll start and get the conversations, and then they'll start learning from each other. All this has been removed. I see even midwives here in New Zealand, they're so afraid of birth. Well, they're not afraid of the birth, they want the normal birth, but they're so afraid of being pulled up if they don't adhere to guidelines, and or picked up for the slightest thing because they didn't do it in a certain way. And these are the mindsets, these are the things that we need to change to bring it together. I worked in Saudi with amazing obstetricians. I remember in 1980, we went to Riyadh, and it wasn't even a hospital then, it was a library that became a hospital that went back to a library to become back a hospital, and we had to start it up from scratch. And we had an amazing obstetrician. He was from London. He was Irish trained, but from London, who really believed in normal birth, but he believed in midwives. And he gave us the keys. We set up our own guidelines. We set up everything. And he knew that if we had a woman and this baby was stuck and we needed this baby lifting out, we called him and he knew we needed him. We didn't call him because we were scared of the birth. We knew that we needed him and that we'd done everything, we could. And these doctors the obstetricians used to bring us Swenson's ice cream, and they used to sleep most of the night. It was great teamwork then. And then when I left there and went back to England, it was a totally different story, with the higher C-section rates, with stressors, where the obstetricians were not, and midwives were not really communicating closely together, and there was a lot of fault picking. But I think that's got worse over the years. The bullying in hospitals, the fault finding. We've got to get over that and live in a peaceful world and realize that we're all at different levels and we all learn from each other, and that it's the woman's health and psychological state that is so important. And they're only going to birth once, twice in a lifetime, unless you come from countries where women have 7, 8 babies. When I was in Saudi, I think the most woman I had, I think she had 18. It was her 18th baby. So we used to see lots of normal births over there. And I was saddened when I went back in 1995 to see that we brought in walking epidurals. So many interventions. The C-section rates had shot up to 30%, 25 to 30%. And we could see how it all came in, but now we've got to undo that and work together as teams. So I need obstetricians, I need it even for the home births or something. If something's not going right and it's not right, and and you're positive, it's very rare, but sometimes you do have to consult with an obstetrician or relate to each other. So like if you're doing a home birth and you've sent a woman in, we often find, and I think it's global, is that there's that mistrust sometimes between obstetricians and midwives. Oh, you should have sent her in 10 minutes earlier. Or we need to stop all this and start looking at situations and really working together. What does Edson think? Anybody else? Gail?
Yes. I would like to hear something about the people who are participating here. I would like to hear something from the audience too, if they want to talk. Hello, Gail.
Who's going to speak?
Thank
Nobody
you so
want
much.
to ask any questions?
Yeah, of course. No, we have many query from Fahime. She's written, I worked 14 years as a midwife and manager. However, I always experience very tentative relationship between gynecologists and midwife. Even they know the most important and most pressure of working in this field is tolerated by midwives, as well as midwives are the first line of treatment in relation with patients. We need some more action to change such area, as well as changing women attitudes towards midwife in their care as professional individuals. And please, can you please unmute Gail? I think, yeah. We need the audience to ask question. If you have any question, please. And we have Yeah. Sachita is written. Thank you so much for the presentation. And Fahime, it was so interesting presentation. I hope one day we could apply such suggestions. And who else? Anna, she's written, thank you for the excellent presentation. I'm from Belize. Welcome, Anna. And Faride, thanks from doctor for his presentation. Mahbube, thank you for great speech. Hope someday soon change will happen. Please, if you have any more question, write in chat box or you can ask to unmute. Can you unmute, Gail?
Everyone,
Waiting.
I got unmuted.
Oh, okay, good, great. Go on, Gail, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, of course, I just love this doctor. I just have to meet him somewhere. I'm jealous that you work with Irene. I want to work with him. Yeah, come on. You know, because, yeah, it's not fair. He has to share himself, have four women or something, or 4 wives. So, but the thing is that how do we get, what's the first way can you share with midwives to get the doctors to listen to what you have shared with us today, Dr. Edson? I mean, how can we get, okay, if a midwife is working in a hospital in India or Belize, how do we get the doctor to listen and to agree to try some new things? Especially if they work in a hospital. I don't work in a hospital because I just gave up, kind of. But those that do work there and want to make change, how do you initiate, and what would be a good way to hook a new doctor into the idea?
Well,
yeah, that is a very good point. Well said, thanks, Gail.
yes, I think this is a very difficult question. I
So
think
challenging.
I should reflect a little to answer it, but I will try, because we have different levels of difficulties. The level 1 is inside our hospital. I think is the easiest one, because here we train doctors, and in their when they enter the hospital, they already knows, and the new doctor, the junior doctors, they already knows that care inside a hospital has a kind of organization, and they already knows that they will learn from midwives. I think this is the easiest one, because there is already a rule, and this rule is accepted by all when they enter inside hospital. And this applies to doctors, to new doctors, when they are hired into the hospital. There is a rule, and there are protocols that state clearly the attributions of doctors and midwives. And there is a kind of horizontal organization, and this is well established. But things becomes a little different when we go to other hospitals that don't have this kind of organization. And we have been working with this kind of hospitals in Brazil. During the last 10 years, I've traveled all the country and to large and small hospitals to talk about this kind of task shifting, or this change in the relationships. And indeed, we can see 2 things. The first one, doctors think midwives will substitute them, and they will be displaced, and they feel sometimes that they are losing their values, and this is a kind of feeling almost of them have. and they mistrust us. When we arrive to tell this, they don't trust, they don't believe. And sometimes I think around 8 years ago, when I had a speech to an audience in a hospital, one of the doctors decided to speak, and he told me, forget this, go to the beach. In one week, nobody will talk about this anymore. Go to the beach and have a better, use your time better. Yes, I had to hear that. But as Gail said, we have to say it again. We have to say it again many times. And sometimes we need rules to reinforce this new kind of organization. And we have to discuss these new rules. And we have to show them. And inside Brazil, nowadays, we have already, through these 10 years of work, we have already many hospitals that have already incorporated midwives successfully. I don't think in the same level we have it in our hospital. There are still many struggles, many conflicts. There is another kind of things doctors usually fear is liability. They think they will be responsible if there are wrongs or if there are problems if there are legal issues. They think they will be, the responsibility will be attributed to them. And this is a kind of thing that sometimes needs time. We have already in Brazil some decisions from the court, and these decisions have already identified responsibility. Some responsibilities are attributable to the midwife and some to the doctors. Because every time we work together, every time will be errors and will be legal problems. And the responsibility will have to be defined. Then I don't know if I'm answering your question, Gabe. But then we need rules. We have been using rules. We have waiting or observing the decisions of the courts, and we discuss this with the professionals. We show them, look here, we have to know there is a responsibility. Everyone is responsible for what they do. Everyone is responsible. And
absolutely,
that implies that midwives are responsible. They must be competent to do what we wait from them. Yes, Gail, I feel that I had to complete and to explain a little more, but I hope I have advanced something.
I think what you're right. And I found the same things. It's this liability and fear of responsibility. On one level, this is why I chose a home birth and to be a licensed home birth midwife in the United States. Because what I do at home, I'm responsible for. When I transport or when I call the doctor and take the patient to the hospital, he is not responsible for anything I did before I brought the patient to him. So it's kind of easy to have a line, because if I didn't take the patient in early enough, then that's my bad. If I took the patient in, the baby's fine, the mother's fine, but there's something that I need their help for, then after they get to the hospital, I then become subservient to the doctor's decision because I have said clear cut. I've tried everything my way. Now I'm passing it to you. And so you're only responsible for what happens after you receive the patient. Much like a car accident, you're not responsible if the guy drinks and drives and gets himself in a mess. You're only responsible for the care of him when he arrives at the hospital, right?
Right. I think it's very clear. And what I know it's this can happen both in a home birth as a home birth model, but this can happen too in a big hospital, in a large hospital. Well, the difference is this kind of care transfer, you know, every time you take a patient to the hospital, this happens many times in a day. Yesterday, for example, I was on ward. I was in the maternity ward, and we make this kind of transfer every time, many times. Sometimes we don't perceive it. We don't feel that we are transferring, we are sharing care, but we do that many times. And midwives there knows you are responsible for what you are doing. If you call the doctor from now is also responsible for it. And what we have to advance is how to share decision between midwife and doctor and the patient, how to share. And
Exactly.
I think this is the great thing of obstetrics, is that because the decisions usually are made because we think what was normal now is abnormal. And we can learn what abnormal and normal is when we talk together. Because midwives.
Okay, now the
Yeah.
other thing you're forgetting is the patient is also responsible because some patients get very obnoxious, at least it's,
Yeah.
you know, so if a patient refuses certain care, then the patient also becomes involved in the outcome.
Yes.
We must respect their choice, but we have a third party there where you can recommend something, the midwife recommends something, and the patient still doesn't want it. And then we have the option of dismissing them from our care, or I had one doctor say to me, if you don't dismiss them from your care and you still put up with what they want, then it implies that you're going along with them. That's a very hard, you don't want to abandon a patient, but if you go along, he sort of said, if a woman wants a birth in the ditch and you say, well, you're going to get in the ditch and help her, then that implies it's okay for her to have the baby in the ditch. And that isn't what we mean sometimes. It means that if this person is so silly, we're still going to try and help them. But sometimes in liability cases, it means it implies you go along with it.
We have some comments from Irene, with your permission. She's written, we have a new code of ethics at Wakaminega Health Council. It is based on the natural laws of trust, respect, partnership, love, spirituality, openness, no gossiping. I love you, Irene. I love you. You're wonderful. Okay, guys, if you have any more questions, any more comments, please share with us. We would be again joining tomorrow, same time at 7 p.m. with the same detail. And we will be happy to have your suggestion and comment about today's class. We have other training coming on for this year, and don't forget, we have the International Women's Day on 8th March. We'll be happy to be with you and participate in that celebration, or introduce all of the women's or talented women for this program to participate and have some live show. We have International Day of Health in 21st of April. And we have another program, pregnancy exercise, yoga and aquanatal, 6th and 7th April. International, we have a midwifery training in 10 till 17 April 2022. And 5th May, International Day of Midwife. 9th May, childbirth class for doulas, and it would be free. 15 May, International Day of Family Health. 16 May, childbirth class for doula. 23 June and 21st till 23rd June, International Day of Yoga. And 6th June, basic prenatal yoga. 6th June, childbirth class for yoga. And 21st June, father's mental health. And we have other coming events that we will share with you. Oh, Irene written, I can make tomorrow as I have to drive 6 hours out of Auckland for a documentary recording session. Irene, you are multi-talent. I love it. All midwives should learn from Irene. You're amazing guy. Okay. Dear all, if you have any more question, please share. Otherwise, we have to wrap up our session. And please turn on your camera. Thank you from Dr. Edson for this wonderful session. God bless you, doctor. And we all, midwife and doctors from all over the world, should shake each other's hand. We should be as a teamwork and move the world. All of us, we are essential for women's health, you as a midwife or as a gynecologist. So please turn on your camera for end of the session. Let's see your beautiful face and have a beautiful picture click together. Thank you. Dr. Edson, if you want to add some point at the end of the session, we will be happy to hear from you.
Okay, for now, I want only to thank you one more, and to Irene, to Gail. Thank you for the conversation. I'm very pleased, and to you. And to everybody that's here, I'm very thankful, and have a good night here in Brazil. It's already midday. Soon I will lunch. And to you, have a good night in India.
Well, hopefully they'll stop all the mandates soon and we can fly places, so we'll all get to meet.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's coming.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, I see very beautiful face here now. And thank you for attending this session. Hope to hear your suggestion and comment after this class. See you guys tomorrow, 7 p.m. IST for second session. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Love you. Bye.
Kind of stuff.
Okay. So I'll see you later today, maybe?
Yeah, did your friends come about one?
I don't know. It depends what time they get here, right?
Yeah,
I don't know what time they're going to start getting.
no problem.
So I'll be here, so if you guys are gonna bring the, what do you do here? That would be good, if you're not around.
Let me, I'm bringing it, but let me, Jose, I bring you battery.
Oh, he's bringing your battery. What do you need, water? Okay, all right. Oh, yeah, I'm okay. I'm keeping up, I'm keeping my. India. Oh, India.
Yeah.
You just have water.
Give me one.
I got it here. Oh, yeah.
Don't go until you get water.
You have an
empty bottle or what it has water in it. You want to go to the refrigerator, man? And